have governed heaven and earth. Man or god, each is heard. Their anger, their pain, and in their time of need, I rise.
Bellona!
So when the day comes that they ascend to the heavens, the rewards that await are not of silver or gold, but jade.
That's right, we're kicking things off good here. Smite Masters week number 2. My name's Gormizer. If you just saw him, it's Trelly. That's going to be on the desk with me. All SPL teams that you didn't see last week, well, not quite all. Most SPL teams that you didn't see last week are going to be playing today. We're going to have the Warriors, the Levi's, the Titans, and the Kings. Tomorrow, we'll have the Bolts and the Dragons joining us alongside the Valks and the Hounds from week number 1, all to compete again for first place. A nice cash prize for them and the ultimate bragging rights of Smite Masters here at the beginning of the year. But again, Gore, Trelly on the desk with me. And Trelly, we've got, I think, just a fun day ahead of us. It's very similar if you were watching last week. In fact, exactly the same as the format. 2 single games between the 4 teams that are going to end up happening, and then 3 best of 3s at the end to determine the 2 teams that are going to move forward from this group. Immediately, though, Trelly, Warriors and Levi's are going to be going up first. I was talking, I think, to you actually earlier today where I said it's really wild to me that I'm preparing for an event. I'm going in here and I'm writing down notes, and it's like, all right, 3 versus 6. And I had to write down Warriors versus Leviathans, and Leviathans was the 6. They weren't the 3. It was really, really mind-boggling, but of course, that is where we are. You just saw the bracket for last week, what we saw on Sunday, and of course, this is what you're going to be seeing today. Both of these, or 2 of these teams, are going to advance. 2 of them are going to be eliminated. Tomorrow we'll see the Dragons, the Valks, the Hounds, and the Bolts all playing. And the rather 2 of them will move forward, and then we'll start getting into a more of a, like, I guess, quote-unquote normal style bracket from that point forward. You've got your semis, and you've got your finals, all sorts of things like that. Warriors are the team that we can look at here, as well as the Leviathans here, Trelly. And this is where things get really interesting. You can see Zap. This is a meta he has been very vocal about, both positively and I want to say, like, quote-unquote negatively? I don't know. He has been ready for it, and I'm excited to see what he has to offer specifically because of the way Hunters have been.
Yeah, Zap's been very vocal on Twitter about how these Hunters have been performing as of recently.
You know they're, like, really good if Zapman's like, yeah, they're in a good spot right now.
Yeah, and anyone that tries to say they're too good, he will just completely roast them and say, you're crazy. You don't know what it's like to be a Hunter in the backline, critting people for 800, that sort of thing. But the Oni Warriors have been looking so solid. It's interesting because if you think about this matchup last year, we would be like, all right, the Leviathans are going to wash out very quickly.
So, all right, so what are you doing in 17 minutes? Because I'm going to be on the desk.
that sort of thing. But now, if you look at how the Oni Warriors have been forming, it's sort of like, man, the Oni Warriors have been looking so solid. This should be a wash in the other direction. But now you have to take into account the fact that neither of these teams have played for quite some time.
Yeah,
they have some time to, go back to the drawing board and think about their drafts in this new meta.
Well, hey, we don't want to take any more of your time. It's 11:13. We're at Picks and Bans for game number 1 of 1. I guess that you don't need to say the game number 1.
Yeah, it's true. It's
just
the game.
That's weird to get used to. We only ever have best of 3s. I'll figure it out probably by the end of the day. Hopefully, we'll see something interesting here. Already, we've got Leviathans as your first pick team. And so far, they've banned out the Amus and Cobb, which doesn't seem too surprising. Hunters on the rise, and something that we already saw the Warriors playing in mid. And the Kleena. So far, nothing really that maybe outlandish over on that side. The Warriors, the Emojin, the Osiris, I maybe argue the exact same thing, Shelly. Nothing that really stands out. Maybe the AMC is the weirdest of the 4.
Yeah, AMC is definitely the quote weirdest, but nothing to look twice at. With how good Dardes is on this pick, specifically, you don't want that in the mid lane. Just gives you so much free pressure. It's not like Shinto can't play it as well, but it looks like that's just not what they're prioritizing right now, and they want to take that one away. Nothing really out of the ordinary. Something to remember is that with this 9.5 update, neither of these teams, we've gotten to see them play on it just yet.
Yeah.
I'm interested to see how they've shifted their strategies, if they've shifted them at all, and what they're really prioritizing here. Taking a little bit of time on this extra ban, and it's going to be the Baron. This is something we saw to come into fruition very strongly in this tournament, not only in the support role, but also in that solo lane with the Bumba's Hammer build, that sort of thing. So I think smart to take that away. Mercury as well. Might be a little questionable if you haven't been watching this tournament thus far, but if you have, this has been up there with pretty much all of these teams being banned away.
And honestly, it's something that I think we've seen very specifically Panatom play in the past successfully. Not often. It feels like a Sam for soccer. Like any other meta, cut it out. It's going to be like, okay, who are you banning this against? It's the Dragons. So here, we'll see, I guess, whether or not, well, we won't be seeing whether or not Mercury can make a huge impact here for the Leviathans. Instead, Zapman gets Jing Wei, so maybe the most banned and most coveted hunter going to one of the most tenured hunter players and the 3-time back-to-back-to-back.
Yeah, that's a no-brainer.
Which is not maybe not a good combination if you're a Warriors fan.
Yeah, if you are a Warriors fan, Rama is still available, which is usually the answer back when Jingwei gets through. Chernobog also been very highly sought after in that duo lane. Anything that can hard carry late game and be safe in mid lane. Wait, if we see the Morgan, I imagine Chernobog's got to be following suit. They love this combo where you can use that Morgan ult to get across the map effectively. You just get 2 globals pretty much immediately, but they don't have to pick it there. The Leviathans, no way they're picking Chernobog here, right? And they can't get banned away, so they have the option just to take away the Nemesis. The shield is going to help you out late game against some of these Jingwei crits, and the fact that you could have 2 Nemesis ults, that's going to be looking pretty solid as well.
Well, it's Cabrakan as an answer. Again, someone that we saw, I want to say, a little bit more often throughout Phase 1, so it's not super surprising. But someone that is relatively tanky. Got the double hunter already on board immediately. And there's no question about this. We've seen Shinto Zuler. We know what Shinto Zuler can do. And sometimes it's even an argument that the Leviathans have had that maybe it's better than Zap Zuler. So maybe it's always worth giving it over to him. You called for the Chernobog, and that does get locked in. So everything done and dusted for the top 6 gods of the match. But how are you feeling? You know, we were talking about this a little bit. J-Mac had mentioned that he was surprised we aren't seeing like a lot of Fafnirs that are coming alongside these double hunters. And you've got a Jingwei, you've got an Ullr, you're going to be hitting pretty hard. Do you think that's a route that the Leviathans could go?
They certainly could. This Cabrakan could go a few different routes here. Obviously, we've seen it flexed many times, more often than not, into the solo lane, but we've seen it in jungle, we've seen it in support as well. So Leviathans, they can hold on to that and just say, you don't quite know where this is going. Maybe we don't even know exactly where it's going. We'll let to see how these picks and bans go a little bit further, and then we'll make our choice. But
Trelly.
Yes.
Hardcore played Hunter.
He did once.
Do you think is the meta wild enough that they could run a triple hunter and put one in mid, one in solo, and one in duo?
I don't think so.
Okay,
I think
it's not that wild
if you ask the casual population.
Look, I'm gone for a week. I had to bring something.
Yeah, I was gonna say if you ask the casual population, they definitely might think so. Everyone's been saying how bad Warriors are, but trust me, they're not. We have seen lots of success from Warriors, and we've seen just traditional like Amas and Bellonas with Death's Toll and Berserker Shield just carrying games once again. So it's still certainly possible, but once this Jingwei gets online, once this Chernobog gets online, you will see some large crits as well. Daji going to be taken away because they're not quite sure if that Cabrakan is going into the jungle. I think that's going to be a smart pick. It does really deal with the Chernobog and the Nemesis if you play around the dash and the fact that Nem probably won't have beads up every single time, and Ymir is going to be taken away as well. I think that's going to add another layer of pressure. So once again, saying that's probably a Cabrakan solo. We're going to ban away a support in a jungle.
Especially with the way you feel. Like, I look at that Ymir and I look up and I go, oh yeah, can't go through walls, can't go over walls, can't go over walls. Like, they're stuck. And then you log into Geb. Guess what he can't do? Yeah, deal with those walls very well. But now they have that shield online with the Ymir banned. They don't have to worry about that lack of mobility otherwise, except for the Cabrakan ults that will lock them in. But you get some good shielding. You had already mentioned the Nemesis shield, but this feels like a really good way, especially with Morgan and Chernobog as like the mainstay carries, to just survive if you're the Warriors. And we were talking about it earlier, but this does feel like it should be a really good meta for them because it's a little slower pace.
I will say this Xing 10 pick we just saw is going to be very solid for the Leviathans, but also just to take it away in case the Oni Warriors wanted to go something like that in the solo lane, which usually is not going to be the case. Obviously, Nika more likes these hard carry assassins where he can just build hybrid and full damage and hard carry these games. Xing Chen is going to shut down a pick like the Leviathans have, where it's like Jingwei, Ullr, Baka, 3 auto attackers. I think that's a great job just to grab that. You have some good CC. Geb is going to have a pretty solid matchup into you, though. That Stone Shield can stop the Whirlwind of Rage and Steel if you're not inside it. So if you're not picking up Geb, you got to watch out where that shield's going to be. I think the Oni Warriors have a very interesting comp here. Obviously, Dardes loves this transformation. He's got a lot of different options here. Just if he wants to go into Nemesis for the burn, he could also just go into Bastet, 2 Bastet ults. That's going to be bad. Or just that Chernobog ult and say, I'm everywhere on the map. You have to worry about me.
And it does, I kind of lean into the question, or not even the question, the meta that we saw the Warriors playing, the gods we saw them playing, not really uncommon for the Bastet solo coming down from Nika. He was playing it prior, and now if you're having a, second guessing about the Warriors, well, guess what? He's playing Assassins anyway, so he's just going to lean further into it. And it feels like it matches. Is a little squishier, though. I mean, like, Morrigan is not necessarily known for taking a lot of hits. Same thing for Chernobog. Nemesis, you had mentioned that shield. It feels like the Geb, though, is going to have a lot of heavy lifting to do on the front lines.
Yeah, Neil's going to have to play pretty perfectly here because I think he will be the target in most of these fights, at least at the beginning. You want to make sure this Geb is getting CC'd. You don't want him shielding these key targets every time. As the game goes on, of course, he's got the built-in crit immunity, so he's not too worried about the Jing Weis, that sort of thing. I think he'll fall by the wayside as the game continues, but he has to play very safely. Might even need a beads here, given how much CC they really have. The Leviathans, they could be looking for some early aggression, and that's saying a lot given the fact that they have 2 Hunters.
It'll be interesting to watch, I think, how they end up I want to say tackling this, just the team comp, as well as all of the changes, everything, with the time to kill, the jungle buffs being themselves a little more difficult early on in the game as well. You had mentioned the Xing Chen as a really good pickup for the Leviathans because the counter pick capabilities that the Warriors would have had against them is through the roof. But, like, even though I'm not looking at everybody on the Warriors as like a baseline auto attacker, it does still feel like he's going to be kind of helpful in shutting down some of that late game.
No doubt, because Dardes is more than often than not going to be transforming into an auto attacker himself, so at that point, Xing Chen is going to get a lot of value with that roar. It just slows down that auto attack damage and makes it super annoying to try and deal with. I think the Leviathans have a very interesting comp here that if it gets to late game, it's going to be a nightmare to try and dive. Even with the Bakasura, it looks like Panatom's just going to go prioritize farm as much as possible, probably start that Golden Blade that we've seen more often than not, and then just you'll look up and you'll see, hey, when did that Baka get level 12?
Well, we'll have to find out how this shakes out. It's the reigning world champs versus the Hot Hand Warriors here in game number 1.
And let's see how they're going to pan out for themselves. We've got a really interesting pick here in that first game. It's going to be, of course, me, Blazybud, and Ro here on the casting. Well, I would say desk, but Hindu kind of roasted me for that last week. So the casting standing up area.
That's right. Look, we've got Dardes on an early pick Morrigan. We've got Nika on his, coveted Bastet, I suppose, which has really only gotten better in this meta. So, not surprising to see him pick it. And he's had his, fair share of bans thrown his way. We had the King Arthur, the Amaterasu. I think that was it. I'm not sure what other... Oh, Baron, I suppose, but that's a little bit of a flex pick. And then, I think my eyes are on Dardes, see what kind of transforms he can come out with.
Right, and I think the biggest targets for him are going to be transforming into this Nemesis, into the Bastet, into the Xing Chen as well, right?
Yeah. I think there's a lot of options. And Dada is generally someone that's pretty good at choosing the right god at the right time. So I think if he gets creative with his transforms, it's going to go great for him. I mean, there's a reason they picked it early. He must be playing it a lot in scrims. He's historically played a lot of the god. But yeah, pretty worrying for Neilmar. I think they said it well on the desk. He is going to be the single frontliner for the early game of, up until the mid game, really. And so as long as he's not getting, picked too much by these double guardians, the Kabrakan, which is in the solo lane, and the Xing Chen, that's good. But I think he can react generally with Cataclysm. He has Blink, so he can't be in combat to react with that one. But as long as he gets backed up when he gets engaged on, gets backed up by his team, then I think he'll be safe enough.
Sure, and there's not a huge amount of hard CC coming out from the Leviathans. He could be scooped up by Rongyu here later on in the game, but realistically, that's the big one. Yeah, that's the big one that he's got to worry about. I don't think needs beats. Shinto does land the axe here onto Dardes, taking a fair amount of poke. Good accuracy from the Hunter from the Leviathans. Now, one thing I do want to ask you about, Ro, is Rongyu here is picking up the Glowing Emerald, potentially going into that Gauntlet of Thieves, we would assume.
Yeah, we saw it a bit last week. I've spoken to actually some other supports, and some people think it's too slow. Some people think it's kind of unnecessary.
That's what I was going to say.
Yeah, Neilmar clearly going for, I would imagine it's a Sovereignty at this point, and maybe into a Spirit Orb or something like that. So you get similar stats, not in the early game, but it balances out over time. So Rongyu obviously trying to scale, but it is a little, weaker in the early game.
Dardes and Shinto once again getting into a bit of an altercation here in the mid lane. This time around, Dardes will get the higher side of that trade, setting about a level up from his mid lane counterpoint, but shouldn't be too much kill potential. Actually, Panatom blinking forward, up, down, miss on the stun from Dardes. Hail of arrows will pick up first blood.
Very well played. Shinto just enough mana to finish that kill. Panatom taking a tower hit to secure it as well. Very well played by them. Dardes not able to beat much. Maybe we just missed the axe that he did beat the end of that. I'm not quite sure, but all of the damage out of Shinto and Panatom connecting in order to get that kill, and it still was close.
Absolutely, and it's going to be a really impactful first blood here. We saw from Oath last week just how impactful this Bakasura can get if it gets off to an early lead. And, well, it wasn't able to pick up the first blood. That is, in fact, going to go in the way of Shinto. But I think either way, Shinto is more than happy with that first blood.
As well, that wasn't a very big time commitment for Panatom anyway. I think he was close to mid regardless and farming, so I don't think he missed out on too much by going back to the mid lane, and he's able to just continue farming. I mean, Bakasura is someone that farms quite quickly anyway, so it's not a big deal. But I imagine he has a small XP lead over QO Fred. Panatom's still yet to back, though, so hurting. Oh, he's just back just now. See if he can finish the Golden Blade. He does, so he's a really good spot now. He can farm as fast as he needs. He's fast, I guess I can use that word again, on his feet because he's got that movement speed, and he can get to this, I guess he's going dual lane to gank, maybe gets back to mid lane, we'll see.
And movement speed is something that we're seeing a lot coming through from the mid lane here. I want to highlight here on Dardes, starting off with this Lost Artifact, has a couple different options as to what he can go into movement speed item-wise. We could see the Karen's Coin, we could see the Doom Orb. What do you think Dardes is going to be leaning more towards here?
I am a Karen's Coin hater right now. I think Obsidian Shard is a fine item. I guess if you want the movement speed, then sure, as long as you want it with your percentage pen. Otherwise, just go Doom Orb. Yes, it's expensive, but it is a lot of power. I think it is worth that gold.
Well, thank you. Very concisely answered. I personally am quite a fan of the Karen's Coin.
Fair,
it's a little bit cheaper. You can get it online, but I totally do understand what you're saying. The Doom Orb comes online a little bit later on, but you get a lot from it.
He's going the Doom Orb as well. I think it's more important to get the earlier movement speed as soon as possible on Oregon because, you know, you essentially have to be in melee range to get that engaged, so getting there faster is what you want, really.
And that's, yeah, going to be important, as you mentioned, for Dardes. Nika, though, in some trouble. Jump already down. Hunter Bast going to be jumped out from Panatom. One more auto should do it, and that's a second pickup for the Leviathans. Panatom already facilitating 2, and that's going to be a pretty bad spot for the Oni Warriors to be in.
I mean, you said it yourself. Bakasura gets active early, and that's what he's done. I think Nika was just trying to avoid Yakor's poke there because Nika isn't going for the Soul Eater, so he doesn't have much sustain. He does have the Chalice, so he should have been okay taking some poke, but he kind of just was walking away, maybe grouping up his wave a little bit as well, and then he's all of a sudden like a full wave below the Bakasura, and his jump doesn't get him very far. He turned around for his ult, which was surprising. I think Panatom can always jump that, so slowing yourself down by turning around probably not the best idea. But if he hits it and Panatom doesn't jump it, it would have worked out. Still, I would have preferred him to use that CC immunity, just keep running forward. Although I'm not sure if it would have helped him regardless. He was in a pretty bad spot there.
Yeah, no, I think Panatom just kind of walks him down for sure.
Fast.
But I think it's important to note that the Oni Warriors, while it's not going super great for them here in the early game, about 2,000 gold behind, I think their comp definitely scales better into the late game than the Leviathan squad does.
Yeah, look, I think that team fight is probably better once we get to, I want to say, like the 26-minute mark when everyone's kind of level 20. But the problem is, I think Leviathan's comp, yes, it is stronger in the early game, but it also peaks quickly at those objective points when, you know, Fire Giant becomes in contention because of the double hunter. They have that DPS, especially with Bakasura. They can burn those Fire Giants down quickly. So if they don't let Oni Warriors, and it helps that they're building an early lead, they don't let early Warriors get to the point of those team fights, then Leviathans could be in a good spot.
Bro, I really actually hold on. Neilmar could be in a little bit of danger, but Panatom picks a way too tanky target in the way of Neilmar, so he's going to be just fine. Bro, I do want to quiz you here about Yakor's choice of build. Now, we've been seeing a lot of this Warlock stuff in the solo lane on these Guardians, but this time around it looks like going for the Book of Thoth, as Neilmar is going to get a little bit aggressive. Rongyu and Shinto here shouldn't be too much kill potential, but tell me about this Book of Thoth.
Love to. Look, he needs the power early game to have the clear, otherwise Yakor is just going to be smacking that wave the whole time with his 3, and it's going to take him forever, so now he can just get the clear and he can rotate out quickly. It will synergize decently well with his breastplate, which he seems to be going, and then in the end, he wants to get that Boomba's Hammer regardless, so if he has the power, he doesn't need the Boomba's Hammer for his jungle clear in the early game. He'll secure this blue buff no problem, for example. Just like that, his 2, well, I guess you have the Bakasura 8, but his 2 hitting almost 300 with that extra power, so not many people on the enemy side that can out-secure him there. So once he gets closer to level 20, maybe even after he gets this breastplate, he'll pick up the Boomba's Hammer. By that point, he'll have a lot of CDR, 40% including his breastplate, a lot of power from Book of Thoth because of the mana on breastplate as well. So it's just kind of really good all round, but definitely high risk early. He's going to take a lot of damage from this Bastet, although Kraken has built-in protections in his 2. So all round a smart choice, just no sustain in the health department like some other choices.
Yeah, well, that's what I was going to ask you about. Like, I did mention already the Warlock stuff has been just so popular because of the extra health that it gives you in this meta that is so health dependent. So why do you think we're seeing Yakor move away from that other stacking item, which does in theory give him a similar amount of power?
Yeah, well, he may be looking for something like a Book of the Dead, so a big shield in the late game. He, may have some big plans for that. I think Polynomicon as well.
Build.
Yeah, Polynomicon quite good there as well on Cabrakan with his one, synergizes quite well. So, maybe just has a full build planned. Otherwise, I would normally say on its own, item to item, I would normally prefer the Warlock Sash as well, but he must have plans in the future.
We'll have to see what Yakor is going to be making of that. So far, it's been pretty quiet. We've had a couple kills facilitated by Panatom, one going his way, one going the way of Shinto, and that has led us to about a 2,200 gold lead in favor of the Leviathans. No big objectives pulled just yet. There hasn't really been too much of an opportunity to. Ro, I want to ask you, where's going to be the contention point for these teams?
I was going to say the Obelisk, but it doesn't seem too well. Yeah, I mean, it's already activated. There we go. So I guess maybe if they can force a Trebuchet here and see where they want to actually push it, then they could do... Well, it's in the left lane, so maybe they don't want to do a Gold Fury while Trebuchet's pushing down, but looks like they just want to invade this blue buff. I don't think Yakor, with all the mana he has, cares if he really loses this, but he seems to be contesting it anyway.
Rongyu and Panatom are hovering around in the jungle here. Shinto also making his rotation over. Neilmar could be getting caught out here. The Cataclysm's going to come through, but immuned out by Panatom. Up and down, rooted through is the Geb, but Panatom's going to get pulled back by Nika. Jump away, he's going to find him safe. Cubo nearly trades his life, but now Vote in a bit of a rough situation, but he's going to be just fine dashing through. Rongyu, though, still looking for some more aggression, blinking forward, trying to find Dardes. Is going to hit the tick damage on that, trading up into the Nemesis, able to find one with the return kill. Final Judgment able to come through. Dardes still just limping away here. I'm not sure there's going to be much out for him. The stealth's going to come out, but no such luck. Did get a return kill, though.
I was almost going to say that was a wasted ultimate. Very surprising that he was managed to get that kill. So, respect to Dada as one of the best Morrigan players in the world. Able to get that transformation off at like 30% health and still manage to get a kill with the help of Nika, to be fair. But look, that's one of the dangers that we said Neilmar's going to face. He is that front line. He's the single front line. He's the only one standing close to that blue buff. So he's a free engage for Yakor. He's a free engage for Xingqian. And, he can't really peel a Bakasura off himself. All he has is that ultimate, which Bakasura can immune. So yes, he did get a 2 or maybe 3-man Cataclysm there, but it doesn't matter too much unless Dardes is in position ready to strike on those stuns. But Dardes not there just yet. We did see both Hunters rotate, which was, pretty good. That was an important fight for them. So not a lot changes. It's just, 2.2k went to what, 3k is that?
Yeah, a little bit of a further lead, 3.5, I think, or no, 2.5, I think is the difference. I can't see the graph, and I'm not willing to do math on cast. I can't do maths just in general, so we'll leave that there. But speaking of the Hunters row, these two, Vote and Zapman, very quiet so far this game.
Yeah, that builds is what I'm going to point out. Shinto actually going for a traditional Ula build. We didn't see much of that last week. We saw a lot more, traditional Hunter meta DPS builds on the Ula, whereas I much prefer this ability damage, especially when you already have a DPS Hunter on the other side. So splitting up your damage in that way is really cool. You have all the objective DPS you need from Bakasura as well, and Shinto is still going to do good objective DPS just as a Hunter. He has his own steroid and just a lot of power as well. So I'd like to see him go the Hydras next, and that way they can really, when they engage on somebody and get those short CCs that they have in the Xingqian knock-up and the Cabrakan stuns, then, you can get a lot of burst damage off with that Ula.
Panatom just being so aggressive so far this game, blinking onto Vote, trying to find the damage. Into the wall he goes. No one really nearby, but rolling through is Neil. He's going to find the health onto Vote. Good call from the Leviathans to let Panatom know that someone is coming. So he backs off perfectly, and that's going to be the quick... well, he gets a little bit extra off the back of that too.
So now the question is Vote healthy enough to take care of that Trebuchet? But it looks like Neilmar is the one that's being baited over.
The roll gets blocked out by Rongyu. Such beautiful body blocking, such beautiful CC from this Xingqian, and surely Neilmar perishes here. Puts him in the washing machine, does Rongyu tanking the tower. These towers do a lot more damage. Vote trying to juke some stuff out here, trying to find his way out, but not quite going to be enough there. Dardes is, as you mentioned, going to ult over, but a little too late.
I'd call that a trebuchet play. I think they pressured that lane by poking out Vote. They leave the trebuchet in the lane, so Vote has to deal with it, and then they turn on Neilmar in the jungle. I think that's smart use of the trebuchet. Whether or not I'm right in my thinking there that it was mostly about the trebuchet, or if it was just Panaton finding that good poke on Vote. You know, both engagements there, Vote choosing not to use his ultimate. The first one, I thought that was very smart. Dashing in the wall, waiting, and then dashing towards your Geb, you're pretty safe. But the second one, I am surprised to see him not ult away. I think it would have been better for him to ult away and Dardes to save his ult than what we saw happen, which was Dardes essentially wasting his ult. He did manage to pick up a wave and I guess save that tower. But Vote, you know, I guess now at least he still has both of his relics and his ultimate, so if they do come back, he is safe. But he's already died once, you know, the damage is done.
I mean, they could have even, in theory, played it aggressively, right? Have Vote go up into the sky, come back down after Dardes makes it over to the left-hand side, and you could make a play under that tier 1 tower. Definitely, the damage there isn't something to scoff at, and Rongyu's on the other side of it. It's could have been a pretty easy turnaround, but instead, this time around, Leviathan's going to start putting some pressure on to this Pyromancer, extend out that lead, and put Oni Warriors into an even worse situation. All the power right now is in favor of the boys in blue. This Leviathan squad is looking pretty dominant.
So this is where we start to get to the point where this Leviathan squad is getting these double hunters online. These Guardians are going to be able to set up, and then Bakasura is able to just do Bakasura things. So they do peak before this team fight stage, and they will have the objective DPS. Just like we saw that Pyromancer die pretty quickly, we can see that Gold Fury die pretty quickly as well. And if they get up to the point where they have a 5-6k lead going into these team fights, then Oni Warriors, despite having a better scaling team fight comp, I think they're going to struggle.
Yeah, it's all about getting to that late game, and I think if Leviathans pick up this pace and continue it at the rate that they have, Warriors might not even get to that point. I will say a lot of the experience differential right now is actually in that dual lane, 2 levels in favor of Rongyu, and I mean, when you're talking about supports, having a Guardian whose base damage is going to be relatively large due to that lack of scaling, having those extra levels on Rongyu is going to make everyone else take a lot more damage from this Jing Chen.
This is an intense fight, both of them completely staring at their monitors in the camera there. Neilmar wins that one out with help of the Gold Fury, to be fair.
He's going to be just fine. Both of these supports not really in too much danger of dying this time around, but Rongyu is going to step up against a couple people here. Panaton waiting in the rings. The Oni Warriors do pick up the Oracles there, which does give them a little bit of a foothold over this Gold Fury. Leviathans aren't going to be able to take that one away just as easily as they were hoping.
There's Rongyu's lead, you know, we see it in front of us. He's able to be confident, walk up to 3 people, try to steal those oracles and you know, stare at those mid camps, I guess, aggressively. You know, he is a big guy right now. He's not going to be blown up by a Morrigan. Maybe with a Nemesis ult and, you know, a couple crits as well, that might help, but he's, you know, about to build it, I imagine, into Spectral as well. So I think he's going to be a pretty tanky boy. Yakor, a lot of mana for that power in his first item as well. So I imagine some magical defense to come for them, for him, and then I guess more damage as well, if not a Boomba's Hammer soon as well.
And Rongyu is building, he's got this Witchblade here, which is going to stop out a lot of that auto-attack pressure that the Oni Warriors have through Cuvo and Vote, and Nika as well to some extent is going to help stop him down a little bit. But Ro, we're seeing this breastplate here. Is this going to be a Sovereignty, do you think? Could be a Spectral or an Emperor's Armor?
I imagine the breastplate will go into a Spectral here just because of the double crit that they have on the other side from, you know, both 2 Wind Demons on the other side already. So, you know, a Spectral quite effective regardless. And if he can stand in front of that damage and poke Geb and threaten Geb as much as possible, or even poke Dardes before he can get these flanks off, then it's going to be very effective. Jing Chen, someone who has some sustain built into his kit already because he has a lot of HP 5. I imagine he'll get a second relic, I would guess. Maybe a shell. You know, I'm worried if I'm Leviathans about my backline as well, because a Nemesis dive, you have a double Chernobog potentially flying into your backline, a Blink Geb if you don't get him in combat, and then a Bastet you can't really stop from getting to your backline either. So I think Jing Wei will be relatively safe, although a lot of the damage, like Bastet damage and Nemesis damage, can be somewhat unavoidable with the ultimate and the Bastet poke, but Shinto definitely going to have to worry. He'll have to, you know, hold his jump or be very smart in the way that he uses his jump and his movement speed, which granted he has a lot of cooldown for, so he could be relatively safe, but that's looks like what Oni Warrior's plan is to get to that backline.
Well, Neilmar could be in some trouble once again, stunned out here, and it doesn't look like there's going to be much of a way out. Yakor right on his tail. He's going to pick up the first blood of this encounter. With the support gone, Ro, I think the Leviathans might look for a play around this Gold Fury.
That's the problem having a Geb as your only frontliner. He doesn't have a warrior in front of him to shield. He doesn't have somebody to peel for him immediately.
Trying to go aggressive is Rongyu, blinking onto Dada as the damage is coming through. Nika, meanwhile, on the backside, has to jump away through that ultimate. Zapman already extends the airstrike, and now coming through from the sky. Vogue gonna hit 3 people with the root down, and that's gonna be a fallen man in the way of Dada as Rongyu picks up a second one here too. Cubo Fred falls down, but finally Zapman is answered back. Nika's able to find one, but it's not gonna be enough. 1 for 3 trade in favor of the Leviathans.
Not a good result, but not a bad attempt from Oni Warriors, especially considering that 4v5, but that's where their comp falters, you know. Why are we waiting for Geb, or why do we have to wait for Geb before we can get these engages on the enemy backline? If they're all looking at Geb, Neilmar that is, then we should be able to get on the enemy backline while they're distracted by killing the Geb. Let's see if Bastek can chase down an Ula here. He will have a decent amount of movement speed.
Surely Shinto doesn't get out of here. Nika with the tick damage from the 2, but Yakor gonna move around the corner, and that's gonna force the retreat from Nika. Shinto's gonna stay scot-free.
Yakor's a happy man right now. He just has... I mean, even last team fight, he got ulted in by the Bastet, and he's like, okay, great, I don't have a movement ability, but I wanted to be here anyway. You brought me to where I wanted to be. So Yakor's had a good amount of impact in both of these fights. He had a good ultimate. He couldn't stop Zapman from dying, but honestly, Zapman lived long enough. He got dove by, I imagine, 2 Chernobogs. He got Nemesis ulted, and then he eventually got finished by Nika as well. So uses both relics, his ultimate, you know, that's what Jingwei does best. But that's why Jingwei is such a good god right now. You can avoid all of the Warriors' damage for a certain amount of time while his team wins the team fight. So Zapman, historically, one of the better players at doing that, you know, ever in the world, just baiting out damage and being able to live in these team fights, does it again in this one.
And that's, I think, something that we've been, going back to the Cabrakan here, Yakor. Finding this impact is something that I think we haven't seen all too much of from Cabrakans in general in this tournament. It feels like it's been kind of wet in some games and hot in some others, but Yakor really making it work this time around, although Oni Warriors able to potentially find the Gold Fury here, blinking forward. Rongyu looking to stop this one out. Cuba Fred gets scooped up. Zapman here with the damage. Frenzy is popped, and now Neilmar is taking the brunt of this. No crits are going to be able to come onto the Rockman, but it's not going to stop Zapman from trying. Should be able to get away with the rollout. Now Rongyu in a little bit of an off position, but I don't think Cubo Fred is going to be able to chew through him.
Important thing to note there, Leviathans, while he just gets blown up by that Ula. That's why I like the ability damage Ula. The important thing is, you know, Leviathans were able to do that Pyromancer while just 2 people, Rongyu and Zapman, were able to force 4 of the Warriors off of the Gold Fury. So now they get both objectives. They win, I wouldn't call that a team fight, but they win that engagement and are now even further ahead. Again, we're getting close to the level 20 mark. Yakor will probably farm out his next 2 levels and get enough gold for that Boomba's Hammer. I can't imagine we'll see a solo kill here just because Vote is on such a safe character. And, you know, obviously Zapman feeling himself because he's quite far ahead at this point.
And now, forgive me if I'm wrong here, if I'm going out too much on a limb, but I'm kind of worried about Oni Warriors' usage of the Chernobog here, and a lot of other use cases of this Cherno. We've been seeing it, especially from the Hounds, pairing it with the Athena, able to make that double rotation to make some of these early game plays, despite Cherno not necessarily being that god. Do you think that's something that the Oni Warriors could have been doing earlier on in this game, or is that maybe something that was off the table from the start?
I'd say to you and everybody watching, really, is that it's harder than it looks. This Chernobog can fly anywhere he wants on the map, but look at the other side of the other team that they're up against. Jingwei, a very fast character. Xing Chen has 2 jumps of his own. Ula, one of the fastest characters in the game. Bakasura, one of the fastest characters in the game. You know, Cabrakan can use his 1 for that movement speed and to immune the slow out of that Chernobog. So now they're actually pressing the go button. Before I expected they have that, you know, double DPS, but I imagine they're just baiting here.
Yeah, it doesn't look like they want to commit just yet, but Neilmar could once again be the target. The rollout is going to find him safe for now, though. Yakor not quite able to close that gap before in range.
I think that's more just Zapman feeling himself. He got that Deathbringer online, so he's able to fly to that Fire Giant, and he says, you know what, if they don't react, which is pretty easy for the Warriors to react, then they could have gone for that Fire Giant, but I don't think Warriors are going to give that up so easily. This T1, on the other hand, whatever. They don't mind too much. Yeah. It's a small gold, you know, I mean, Leviathan's at such a big lead now. I don't think they want to fight for that tier 1 anyway, and it's not going to make too much of a difference.
No, for sure. It's not all that much pressure or gold this stage in the game. Leviathan's at a staggering 8,000 gold lead, which, in all honesty, here at 21 minutes into the game, it's not so bad, but it is, as you just mentioned, the 9,500 experience lead that's really going to mess them up. And Nika takes a huge amount of damage from those 2 abilities from Yakor, has to run away straight away.
That's Blink down. Nika with a very interesting build. 2 stacking items, 10% CDR on each of his items so far. So he's a pretty fast guy. He's not going to have too much problems. He didn't even have to beads that. So that's Yakor's Blink down. But it just looks like they're trying to pressure and trying to create space because they do feel like they can do this Fire Giant or other objectives sometime soon.
Nika, though, is able to step up, and that should be enough pressure for the Warriors to make the Leviathan stop. Zapman getting aggressive. Vote didn't get a lot of range off of that first dash. We're looking here on the left-hand side. Dardes transforming into the Chanabog, trying to find the distance. And look at that damage. The slows should be enough. The beads and ages coming through from Zapman, but he is surely dead.
Now they're on the Fire Giant, though. That was a big commitment to chase down that dual lane, so that opens up the opportunity for Shinto to DPS here.
And there's no way Neilmart is able to pick this one up by himself. The CC chain comes through, and the Oni Warriors may pick up a kill onto Zap on the left-hand side, but they will forfeit the Fire Giant in return here at 22 minutes.
That man laughing his way to the bank. He doesn't mind. He probably would have preferred he didn't use his relics, but really he's just trying to stay alive.
Zap relics.
Yeah, I mean, he's just trying to stay alive for as long as possible so his team has as much space as possible to do that Fire Giant. It's a little disappointing that Cuvafred wasn't there. I can't imagine he's going to do much anyway, unless Nika, Cuvafred, and Neilmart are all there, but still, that's a hard task to fight. A 3v4 when you're already behind.
Cuvo gets caught out at the red buff. Just eviscerated here on the left-hand side, and that's going to be a really big pickup to open up even more space for the Leviathans. And talking about this Nemesis row, I don't feel like Cuvo's had a lot of impact.
He hasn't, but you know, he's had some rough early games so far this season. And for me, my motto for him is he's often been down but never out. This time, however, he's up against Leviathans who now have 4 finished starters. I imagine Rongyu will be able to finish his as well after they get a couple towers. So that's a very tall task. He has the crit, but honestly, there's 2 Spectrals on the other side. He could potentially outbox a Bakasura, but he's really behind at this point.
And that is the flip side of this, of course. Panathom on this Bakasura, 5-0-4 at the moment. The jungler from the Leviathans really making a lot of these plays possible, locking down the Oni Warriors and making sure that they die before they have a lot of a chance to. And now with that left tier 2 down, the Phoenix opened up. The Warriors have to stage a defense here. They've got a couple decent tools available to them, but can they use them properly?
Not letting off the pedal here. They're just going to push straight in. I imagine they can take some poke here, heal it up. Let's see if they can hit the Phoenix a couple times and just kind of do a slow siege.
Shinto able to get a little bit of poke off. Zapman so far getting some free damage onto the Phoenix. Rongyu blinking in. Does get traded out about half of his HP, and luckily for the, well, I say luckily, Warriors play that very, very well. They're very patient, they don't overcommit to anything, and because of that, they hold on to their bird.
That's right. It is early in the game, so Leviathan's just testing the waters there, I suppose. They'll go ahead, get this free gold and this Oni Fury. I imagine they'll push these tier 2 towers that they have remaining as well, and by the time, I guess their Fire Giant buff will expire by the time they can siege a Phoenix unless Vote gets picked here. But they're going to have such a big lead going into this next Fire Giant because 2 objectives now going down, Pyromancer just about, and then 2 towers still remaining as well. So this gold lead is about to get much worse for the Warriors. They are hitting level 20, but they're hurting on gold. The XP won't matter as much anymore, but still, Neilmart level 13 against a full squad of level 20 soon.
Yeah, it's definitely looking rough for the support from the Oni Warriors. And for Dardes too here, we're talking about these defenses. You really want some of that big mage damage to help you clear out some of these minions in the siege, get some decent damage online. Dardes doesn't really have that option to him on his team or the other team.
One of his strengths on the siege defense, and it's not a big one, is that you can threaten the backline a little bit. So you scare the backline from pushing up and poking that Phoenix. But when this backline's level 20 and these huge hunters, I don't think they're really scared of Dardes. They'll just pop a beads and hold down left click and be able to outbox whatever Dardes transforms into. So at this point, you know, unless they can find a pick in the jungle, the Morrigan seem pretty weak.
Yeah, and this is, I think I mentioned to you when we were watching Picks and Bans, picking this character up so early maybe allowed Leviathans to shape their draft around that. Not that, you know, I'm looking at their team comp, I'm thinking, would they have really drafted differently if it weren't for the Morrigan. But I think Oni Warriors definitely picked themselves into a bad situation with this character.
So far, I mean, both teams, I mean, this is the best of one, and it's only the first draft we've seen from either one, but it just looks like two very different styles. One, on the Warriors side, they want to be able to rotate fast and find picks quickly. And on the Leviathan side, they just want the early pressure and to snowball that into objectives. And that's exactly what they've done. And they're able to avoid getting picked by the Warriors team comp because they are so fast around the map. They can easily group up within a matter of seconds, even if those Chonobogs are flying to the team fights before they can. We saw Zapman fly to that blue buff in the early game. So they're just ready to take these fights in the early game. They don't want to be outnumbered by these global ults. And then they win the 5v5s as long as it's not an even game at like 30-something minutes at this rate.
Right, tier 2 is going to fall down, and now it's only Birds protecting the Titan here of the Oni Warriors. The Fire Giant should respawn in about a minute and a bit here. Leviathan's in a pretty decent position to try and take that one. You could be in danger, but look at the damage onto Cuvo. Fred has to pop that shield to stay alive. Dardes as well in a rough situation, transforms into Dardes as well. Panatom running away, trying to find some life, but Dardes's HP is shredded low, but Panatom doesn't have a lot of options, and he's alone here. But Dardes gonna get finished up there. Panatom should fall down, but scratch that. He's gonna find the kill onto Cuvo. Now Nika's gonna fall down to Zapman. Vote is gonna take a spill here too with a clean deicide. Leviathans end game 1.
Not what I expected. Honestly, yes, they had a huge lead, but I expected them to wait for a next Fire Giant. They decided, you know what, we've got such a big lead, we can just hang her out here, we can look for a pick, and then all of a sudden Warriors walk in, try to fight them in the 5v5, and it doesn't go well for them at all.
It's just so unexpected, out of nowhere almost. The Leviathans, I mean, it's just such a good look from them. Clearly the communication was on point. They were able to recognize, okay, we have an opportunity to go for a fight here. They commit, and they can end.
Yeah, I mean, a great comp from them as well. I think they kind of hit firing on all cylinders here, and that's what we're expecting from the World Champions. You know, they didn't have a great Phase 1, but wow, what a showing from them today to take it to the Warriors, who, one, have been great this year, and two, a meta I thought would fit them really well. So I think Leviathan's bans were fantastic, banning away things like the AMC, forcing Dardes on a more typical mage for him, like the Morrigan, and then playing their double Hunter team comp, which they're great at, and then a great setup for them as well, for the Bracken solo, the Xingqian support, and then, I mean, Panatom and the Bakasura in a league of his own as well.
Yeah, I think the Leviathans have really showcased that they've been paying attention. They were seeing what the SCC kids were doing, and they are definitely proving they can implement it just as well. But let's go over to the desk to see what they think of that game.
I think it was a lot more one-sided than I expected going into it. That's the way to put it at the very beginning. Scorch Trelly one more time. And Trelly, I mean, it got out of hand fast. I mean, it slipped through very quickly. Then the Leviathans just kind of continued that role, whether it was pressure onto the Geb or pressure in general across the map, and they just seemed to have it.
Yeah, we touched on the desk a little bit before that game, obviously, and it just seemed like their comp was early aggression, play through Panatom, and focus out Neil. Neil was the only tank on that squad. They knew that Nika likes playing this Bastet, building full damage and going in after the fact. You can't really play that style when your Geb is gone. You need Neil to be surviving these team fights, but he also can't be the sole frontline. Geb against triple auto attackers is going to be getting burned through very quickly, as we saw time and time again there.
There were several times, unfortunately for him, where maybe his ult was just a little mistimed, or his life was forfeit a lot of the time, whether through his doing or the Leviathans. They chased him down really well. And that's where things went, I think, awry. And it's unfortunate to say it's so early, but Dardes had, or at least felt like for the first wave, maybe wave and a half, 2 waves, good control over mid.
Right.
And then in the blink of an eye, Shinto got first blood, and Dardes stopped being as big of a player through mid.
I think it was the blink of a Baka.
Yeah, well, yeah, you know, really good point. The blink of a Baka, and that's all it takes. And then I think this was the maybe kind of, not necessarily final nail in the coffin, but definitely one of them over in the duo lane. Then you get a play, they kill off Zap, but a Fire Giant is what they end up sacrificing for it over on the other side. You give a lot of priority over towards the Leviathans. Well, like they said at the end of the cast, it just seems like they watched what was going on, they've practiced what was going on, and they're playing it damn well as Leviathan. 6-0-7 there for Panatom. Just a clean game. That's not the end of the road, though, for the Warriors. They'll be playing a little bit later on. They have to win 2 best-of-3s now in order to continue on through Masters. We'll see who they end up against, because next, Trelly, the Leviathans will be playing the winner of this set, the Kings and the Titans. I think it's going to be really fun. But after what we just watched, it seems like the Leviathans have a pretty good grip on this. And it was something we were talking about a lot during Phase 1, which was that it felt weird that something was going off, whether it was just they couldn't play the meta or maybe everybody else just kind of stepped up to the occasion. It was a little bizarre to see them not doing so well. So already coming out with a very emphatic statement here in their first game, I think shows off a little bit more. But we can take a look at that bracket and see what you can expect for the rest of the day. The Titans and the Kings are up next. Winner of that goes up against the Leviathans. Loser of that takes on the Warriors. Either way, I think we're still in for a hell of a day. This is looking like some fun best of threes. But of course, that single game is what we're going to be getting through. And this one is an interesting conversation. I'm sure the desk is going to break it down a little bit more when we get in front of that. But the Titans and the Kings, I mean, this is something, especially with the pace of it, it feels like it could kind of be a coin flip.
Yeah, I think you're right to mention that. And going into this match, we talked a little bit about the meta, how it sort of favors the Leviathans and how these late game ADCs they like playing through. This meta also favors, I think, the Kings playstyle very well. Captain Twig has already played picks like the Baka before this quick farm Golden Blade meta came to fruition. They've already been doing this. They've been playing the map so well, so if they're able to continue that, and obviously if the Titans haven't made their own adaptations, which we know they have, they've been, they've had quite some time to learn this meta and scrim stuff like that, but I think the Kings, they're going to be pretty happy about it, the way that this meta has, changed their style.
Well, it's going to be a fun game to watch, but all of that is going to be right after this. We're going to kick it to a quick break, and when we get back, it's the Titans and the Kings.